Ethan had never expected his life to change in such a sudden and dramatic way. He was an ordinary researcher on Earth, a man who spent most of his days studying alien species and their cultures. Yet the moment he received the message from his old friend, Corvan, his world was turned upside down. Corvan was no ordinary friend. He was an alien, a member of a race called the Alanthians, known throughout the galaxy for their advanced technology, vast wealth, and political influence. They were a peaceful people who valued wisdom and cooperation. Over the years, Ethan had worked with Corvan on numerous diplomatic missions between Earth and the Alanthian Empire, and in time, they had become close friends. But now, the message Corvan had left behind was something Ethan had never imagined. The alien had passed away, his final days filled with a mix of wisdom and sadness. It was a legacy Ethan had never expected to inherit. Corvan's message was clear. "Ethan, my trusted friend, I leave you everything. The fortune I built, the starship I commanded, and my two most cherished companions, Lyra and Saline. You will be their protector now. Take care of them as you would your own." The words still echoed in Ethan's mind as he sat alone in his small apartment, staring at the holoscreen that had delivered the message. He was still trying to process the overwhelming responsibility Corvan had placed upon him. The fortune was beyond anything Ethan could comprehend. Corvan had built a vast empire through trade, amassing wealth from rare resources, ancient artifacts, and galactic deals that spanned across multiple star systems. The starship, a magnificent vessel designed for both speed and luxury, was unlike anything Earth had ever seen. It could travel across the galaxy in a matter of days, equipped with the latest technology and weaponry. But the most surprising part of the message came when Corvan spoke of his two companions, Lyra and Saline. They were not just his partners, they were also powerful, influential figures within the Alanthian society. Lyra was a brilliant strategist and political advisor, while Saline was a compassionate diplomat with a talent for bridging gaps between different cultures. Both women had chosen to stay with Corvan for reasons unknown to Ethan, and now they were his responsibility. He had never met them, and the thought of becoming their guardian was both thrilling and terrifying. Corvan's final request was simple: protect them, guide them, and honor the bond they shared. It was hard for Ethan to imagine his life changing so drastically. Just days ago, he had been an ordinary man, living a quiet life on Earth. Now, he was thrust into the heart of a galactic legacy that could alter the fate of entire star systems. As he sat there, still reeling from the unexpected news, a communication pinged on his terminal. It was a message from an unknown sender, encrypted with the highest level of security. Ethan hesitated for a moment before opening it. The screen flickered to life, revealing the face of a familiar woman, Lyra. "Hello, Ethan," she said, her voice calm but authoritative. "I trust you've received the message from Corvan. We are waiting for you to join us. There is much to discuss." Her eyes were filled with a mix of curiosity and determination. Ethan could tell that she was not someone who would easily be swayed. She had a sharp intellect, and the way she carried herself spoke volumes about her confidence and strength. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her gaze even through the screen. "Yes, I received the message," he replied, trying to sound as composed as possible. "I'm still trying to understand everything." Lyra's expression softened slightly, but only for a moment. "There is much you need to know," she said, "but first you must come to us. We will explain everything in person." Ethan agreed, knowing that there was no turning back now. He had inherited more than just wealth and power. He had inherited a responsibility he didn't fully understand. Corvan's death, though tragic, was the beginning of something much bigger than anything he had imagined. As the transmission ended, Ethan stood up and walked to the window, gazing out at the stars. His mind raced with questions. Who had caused Corvan's death? Why had he chosen Ethan for this enormous responsibility? And most importantly, what role would Lyra and Saline play in his new life? He didn't have answers yet, but he knew one thing for sure. His journey was just beginning, and the road ahead would be filled with challenges he couldn't yet foresee. With one final look at the stars, Ethan gathered his things and made preparations to leave Earth. He didn't know what awaited him, but he was determined to honor Corvan's last wish and discover the truth behind the legacy he had inherited. Ethan stepped onto the starship, his heart racing with a mix of excitement and anxiety. This wasn't just any ship. It was Corvan's prized vessel, the one he had used to navigate the far reaches of the galaxy. It was sleek, with smooth curves and metallic surfaces that shimmered under the ship's lighting. The interior was filled with luxury, a sharp contrast to Ethan's simple life back on Earth. He couldn't help but marvel at the opulence, though he knew it was all part of the responsibility that had now been thrust upon him. Liara and Saline were waiting for him in the main chamber, their expressions unreadable. They stood together, side by side, their presence commanding yet graceful. Despite the wealth and power they represented, there was a calmness to them, as if they had seen it all before. Liara was the first to speak. "Welcome aboard, Ethan," she said, her voice steady and composed. "I trust you've had enough time to process your inheritance." Ethan nodded, though he didn't feel like he had processed anything yet. "I'm still trying to wrap my head around all of this," he admitted. "It's a lot to take in." Saline, standing beside Liara, smiled warmly. "Don't worry," she said, her voice soft but firm. "We understand. This is a lot for anyone to understand, especially when it's so sudden." Her eyes sparkled with kindness, a stark contrast to the intense energy that seemed to surround Liara. Ethan glanced at both women, feeling a surge of responsibility. They weren't just Corvan's companions. They were powerful and intelligent individuals in their own right. Liara had been Corvan's advisor, a strategist who had played a key role in many of his dealings, while Saline was known for her diplomatic skills and ability to negotiate with even the most difficult of individuals. Both women were not only his inheritance, but also the key to understanding the full extent of Corvan's life and legacy. I don't know how to act around you both," Ethan admitted, unsure of how to approach them. "Corvan was my friend, but I wasn't prepared for any of this." Liara's gaze softened, and she took a step forward. "You don't need to act any certain way," she said gently. "You need only be yourself. Corvan trusted you, and that's why you're here. We'll help you adjust to this new role. We're not here to complicate things. We're here to help you understand what you've inherited." Ethan felt a wave of relief wash over him. Liara's words were calm, reassuring, but he couldn't help but wonder how much more complicated things could get. Being entrusted with a fortune and the care of two women wasn't exactly simple, but somehow, with them by his side, he felt that maybe he could handle this. The ship's systems hummed to life as Saline approached, her steps light yet confident. "There is one thing we need to discuss," she said, her tone serious. "This fortune you've inherited is more than just wealth. It's part of a much larger legacy, a legacy that Corvan worked hard to build and protect. And now, it's your responsibility to continue that work." Ethan nodded slowly, understanding that this wasn't just about money or luxury. It was about the future of the Elanthian Empire, the alliances Corvan had made, and the power he had built over years of careful trade and diplomacy. Saline continued, "There are many who will try to take what you've inherited. Corvan's enemies are not far behind. They see your fortune, your position, as a threat, and they'll stop at nothing to take it from you." Liara added, "We must be cautious. Your wealth and the starship are valuable, but they are also targets. We need to figure out who is behind this threat and how to protect what Corvan left behind." Ethan's mind raced. He had known Corvan as a wise and experienced individual, but he hadn't realized just how dangerous the legacy would be. "I didn't know Corvan had enemies," he said quietly. "Everyone with power has enemies," Liara replied. "Corvan's success made him a target, but now you're the one standing in his place. It's up to you to keep his empire strong and safe." Ethan felt the weight of their words, the gravity of the situation settling in. He wasn't just here to manage a fortune. He was here to protect it, to defend it against those who would destroy it. Saline placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch gentle but firm. "We will help you," she said. "You won't be alone in this." Ethan looked at her, feeling a sense of gratitude. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew he wasn't alone. With Lyra and Saline by his side, he felt like he could face whatever challenges lay ahead. The ship's engines roared as it powered up, ready to leave Earth behind. The stars outside the viewport sparkled, a reminder that this was only the beginning. Ethan had inherited more than just a fortune. He had inherited the future of a galactic empire. And though he didn't fully understand it yet, he was ready to face whatever came next. The journey had only just begun. The starship sped through the vast emptiness of space, leaving Earth behind. Ethan sat in the command seat, the soft hum of the engines filling the room as the stars outside the viewport blurred into streaks of light. He couldn't shake the feeling of uncertainty, like he was stepping into something far beyond his understanding. Corvan's death had left a void, and now he was the one expected to fill it. Liara stood at a control panel nearby, her fingers moving with practiced ease over the sleek interface. She had a calm focus about her, as if she were in complete control of the situation. Saline sat beside Ethan, her eyes scanning the star charts displayed on the main screen. "Where are we headed?" Ethan asked, trying to steady his nerves. His mind was still reeling from everything that had happened in such a short amount of time. The vast wealth, the legacy, and the two women who had once belonged to Corvan. Now, they were his responsibility. He couldn't help but wonder how much more was at stake. "We're going to the heart of the Elanthian Empire," Lyra answered without turning away from the console. "Corvan's estate is located on a planet called Valoran. It's a hub of political and economic activity, and it will be the place where we can begin to understand just how much power you've inherited." Saline spoke up, her tone thoughtful. "Valoran is also where Corvan held his meetings with influential leaders from all over the galaxy. His legacy isn't just wealth. It's a network of allies and potential threats. There's much we need to learn about these relationships if we are to protect your future." Ethan nodded slowly. He had no experience in galactic politics or interstellar diplomacy. Back on Earth, he was just a researcher, someone who had spent most of his life studying alien species and their cultures. Now, he was thrust into a world of power plays and dangerous alliances. "What should I expect when we arrive?" Ethan asked, trying to gather his thoughts. Lyra's eyes met his briefly, her expression serious. "Expect intrigue. Expect deception. Not everyone will welcome you with open arms, but the Elanthian Empire is vast, and it is not easy to take down someone at its core. As long as we stay united, we will be able to defend what Corvan left behind." Saline added, "There will be those who will try to manipulate you, those who want to use you to further their own goals. We need to be careful who we trust and who we don't." Ethan felt the weight of their words. He had never imagined that inheriting so much would come with such dangers. But now, he understood that this wasn't just about wealth and power. It was about navigating a complex web of politics and alliances that spanned entire star systems. The journey to Valoran was long, but as the days passed, Ethan spent more time talking to Lyra and Saline, learning about the intricacies of the Elanthian Empire and the delicate balance of power Corvan had maintained. Lyra explained the economic systems, the trade routes, and the complex political games that kept the empire functioning. Saline shared her knowledge of diplomacy, teaching him how to read the intentions of others and how to communicate effectively with leaders from various species. Ethan found himself slowly adjusting to this new reality. He wasn't sure he was ready for all of it, but he knew he couldn't afford to back down. Corvan had trusted him with this responsibility, and he would honor that trust. As the days passed, Ethan found himself growing closer to both Lyra and Saline. Lyra's sharp intellect and commanding presence intrigued him, while Saline's warmth and diplomatic skills made him feel more at ease. They weren't just companions. They were allies, and in this new world, allies were more valuable than gold. But as the journey continued, a nagging thought began to form in Ethan's mind. Corvan had left behind not only wealth and power, but also enemies. Those enemies would stop at nothing to take what Corvan had built. They were out there, watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. And though Ethan had no experience in dealing with these kinds of threats, he knew that Lara and Sailing were right. He couldn't face this alone. He had to rely on their wisdom, their knowledge, and their strength. As the starship approached the outskirts of the Elanthian Empire, the stars began to cluster together, marking the entrance to Valoran space. Ethan could see the planet in the distance, a beautiful blue world with lush green continents and sprawling cities that stretched across its surface. "This is it," Lyra said, her voice steady. "Valoran, this is where your journey truly begins." Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything Corvan had entrusted to him. This was no longer just about protecting a fortune. It was about protecting an entire empire and the future of the galaxy. And as he looked out the viewport at the vast expanse of space, he knew that the challenges ahead would test him in ways he couldn't yet imagine. But he was ready, or at least he hoped he was. The starship glided toward the planet, the adventure just beginning. As the starship entered Valoran's orbit, Ethan felt a mix of awe and tension. The planet below was a breathtaking sight, with its sprawling cities and vibrant landscapes. Yet as they neared the capital city, a sense of unease settled over him. This was where it all began. This was where he would have to prove himself worthy of the fortune, the legacy, and the responsibility Corvan had left behind. Liara and Sailing were busy preparing for their arrival, checking the communications and scanning the local news feeds. Ethan sat in the command chair, trying to gather his thoughts. He was about to meet the people who would shape his future. Alliances, enemies, and rivals. And in this game of politics, trust was the most valuable yet fragile commodity. Valoran's capital is one of the most politically charged places in the galaxy, Lyra said, her voice steady as always. The city is home to the most powerful figures in the Elanthian Empire. You will meet them all, and they will judge you based on how you carry yourself. Ethan nodded, trying to mask his nerves. "I just hope I can live up to Corvan's legacy." "You will," Sailing said softly, offering him a reassuring smile. "You have something that Corvan didn't always have: time. You have the opportunity to learn, to grow into this role. But time is also something that can run out quickly." The ship descended through the atmosphere, passing over tall towers, lush parks, and rivers that glittered under the sun. As they approached the landing platform near the center of the city, Ethan couldn't help but feel like he was stepping into a world that was both ancient and modern, full of history and progress, but also rife with hidden dangers. The ship's landing gear touched the surface with a soft thud, and the crew disembarked. Ethan was met by a group of dignitaries, dressed in elaborate robes, their faces neutral but their eyes scanning him with calculated interest. Lyra and Sailing walked beside him, their presence commanding respect, but it was clear that Ethan was the one everyone was watching. His every move, his every word would be scrutinized. One of the dignitaries, a tall Elanthian with sharp features and piercing green eyes, stepped forward. "Welcome to Valoran," he said in a deep voice. "We are honored to receive you, Lord Ethan, successor to Corvan. The Empire awaits your leadership." Ethan stood tall, trying to muster the confidence Corvan had once carried so effortlessly. "Thank you," he replied, his voice steady, but not without a hint of uncertainty. "I'm here to learn, to understand how things work. Corvan left a legacy I intend to protect." The dignitary smiled, though his eyes remained unreadable. "A wise choice," he said, "but protected you must. The Elanthian Empire is a delicate balance, and many eyes are upon you." As the dignitaries led them into the grand palace, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Every step felt like a test. Every word he spoke weighed down by the legacy he was now carrying. Lyra and Saline remained silent, walking with him as the palace doors opened to reveal a large council chamber, its walls lined with marble and illuminated by the soft glow of crystal chandeliers. Inside, a group of leaders from various sectors of the empire waited. There were military commanders, business moguls, diplomats, and influential aristocrats. They all turned their attention to Ethan as he entered, their gazes piercing and curious. One of the commanders, a woman with short-cropped silver hair and a scar running across her cheek, spoke first. "You must be the one Corvan spoke of," she said, her voice sharp. "The inheritor of his wealth and power. But power is not simply given, it is earned." Ethan met her gaze, holding his ground. "I'm not here to claim power. I'm here to learn how to protect what Corvan built." The commander nodded slowly, sizing him up. "You will learn quickly, I hope. The Empire is not a place for those who are weak or unprepared. There are many forces at play here, and not all of them are friendly." Ethan's heart raced. This was it, the first test, the first of many challenges he would face. His ability to lead, to negotiate, to outmaneuver his opponents was being measured right here, right now. A tall man with a long black cloak and piercing blue eyes stood up. He was known throughout the galaxy as the leader of the Galactic Trade Coalition, a powerful and influential figure who controlled vast portions of the Empire's economy. "I agree with Commander Talia," he said, his voice smooth but filled with underlying tension. "Power is not inherited, it is taken. And if you are to lead this empire, you must understand that your wealth is both a blessing and a curse. Many will seek to claim it, and they will do whatever it takes." Ethan's grip on his resolve tightened. "I'm not afraid of threats," he replied, his voice firmer than he felt. "I will face whatever comes, with or without allies." The room fell silent for a moment, as if they were all considering his words. Lyra and Saline stood behind him, their expressions unreadable, but Ethan could sense their support. The dignitaries and leaders exchanged glances, each weighing the young man who had just inherited a galaxy's worth of power. It was clear that his journey had just begun. But Ethan was determined to prove them wrong. He wouldn't be just a puppet in this game of power. He was here to fight for Corvan's legacy. He could feel the weight of their stares, but he refused to let it break him. This was just the beginning, and he would rise to meet the challenge. The days on Valoran blurred into a whirlwind of meetings, discussions, and tense negotiations. Ethan was slowly learning the intricate ways of the Empire, with its complex alliances and rivalries. Every day felt like a battle, not just to protect what he had inherited, but to prove that he could handle the power and influence that came with it. Lyra and Saline remained his most trusted advisors, offering guidance and support in equal measure. As they moved through the Grand Palace, each corridor seemed to echo with history, and the whispers of power were ever present. Ethan found that the politics of the Alanthian Empire were not as simple as he had imagined. It wasn't just about wealth and resources. The leaders of the Empire played a dangerous game, where allegiances could shift in an instant and betrayal was always lurking in the shadows. One morning, they were summoned to a private meeting with Lady Valora, the head of the Empire's most influential merchant guild. Lady Valora was known for her sharp business acumen and her ability to manipulate the markets to her advantage. Her wealth and influence were unmatched, and her words carried weight across the entire empire. As they entered the ornate meeting room, Lady Valora greeted them with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Lord Ethan, it is a pleasure to finally meet you in person," she said, her voice smooth like silk. "Your late predecessor, Corvan, was a man of great vision. It is good to see that his legacy is in capable hands." Ethan met her gaze, offering a polite smile in return. "Thank you, Lady Valora. I'm here to learn from the best." Corvan's vision was vast, but there is still much to be done. The merchant leader leaned forward, her fingers tapping rhythmically on the table. "Indeed," she said, her eyes narrowing slightly. "The galaxy is ever-changing, and maintaining control of the markets is more difficult than ever. But with your resources and influence, you have the power to shape the future. Perhaps we can find a way to work together." Ethan was careful with his words. He knew that Lady Valora was offering more than just a business partnership. She was testing him, trying to see if he was someone she could trust or manipulate. "I appreciate the offer, Lady Valora," Ethan replied carefully, "but I believe trust is earned. I'm not here to make quick deals. I need to understand the Empire first. I would like to take the time to assess all the opportunities before committing to anything." Lady Valora's smile faltered for a moment, but she quickly masked it. "Of course. I understand your caution. The future is uncertain, and you must tread carefully. But remember, Lord Ethan, opportunities often come at a cost. It would be unwise to let them slip away." Ethan nodded, knowing that this conversation was far from over. As they left the meeting, Lara leaned in, speaking softly. That was a careful response. "Valora is a skilled negotiator, but she's not easily fooled. She'll be watching you closely. If you show weakness, she'll strike." Celine added, "It's not just Valora we need to worry about. There are others here who will test you in more subtle ways. Political games are played with subtlety and patience. Do not rush into anything unless you are certain of the consequences." Ethan took their advice to heart. He couldn't afford to make any mistakes, especially now. The Empire was filled with people who would stop at nothing to get what they wanted, and if he wasn't careful, he could find himself surrounded by enemies before he even knew it. Over the next few days, Ethan attended several more meetings, each one revealing more about the complex web of alliances and rivalries that held the Empire together. There were whispers of a faction called the Irindari, a group of military leaders who were dissatisfied with the current leadership and who saw the shifting power dynamics as an opportunity to strike. Ethan's attention was drawn to a particular figure among the Irindari, a tall, imposing man named Commander Zoreth. He was known for his strategic mind and his ruthless methods in battle. His presence was commanding, and when he spoke, even the most powerful leaders listened. During one meeting, Zoreth's sharp eyes locked onto Ethan's as the young man entered the room. The commander made no effort to disguise his scrutiny, his gaze lingering on Ethan longer than necessary. Lyara, ever watchful, noticed the tension. "Zoreth is dangerous," she murmured under her breath. "He's a man who seeks power, and he's not afraid to take it by force if necessary. Be careful around him." Ethan nodded, feeling the weight of her warning. He had heard rumors about Zoreth's ambitions, but seeing it firsthand gave him a clearer picture. Zoreth was not someone to be underestimated. As the meeting continued, Zoreth remained silent, his sharp eyes studying Ethan like a predator sizing up its prey. Ethan knew that the commander was sizing him up, trying to figure out if he was an ally or an obstacle. Finally, as the meeting ended and the leaders began to leave, Zoreth approached Ethan. "Lord Ethan," he said, his voice deep and cold, "I hear you have inherited much from Corvin. I wonder how long it will take before you realize that true power is not given, but taken." Ethan met Zoreth's gaze without flinching. "I don't need to take anything. I intend to earn it." Zoreth chuckled darkly. "We shall see, Lord Ethan. We shall see." The encounter left Ethan feeling unsettled. It was clear that Zoreth's ambitions were not in line with his own. The commander had already chosen his path, and it was one filled with danger and power struggles. Ethan had to decide if he would stand firm in his own beliefs or become part of the Empire's ruthless games. As the meeting room cleared, Lyra and Celine gave him knowing looks. They understood the weight of what had just transpired. "This is just the beginning," Celine whispered. "You must navigate this carefully. Zoreth is not the only one who will challenge you." Ethan nodded, his mind racing. He was beginning to understand just how treacherous this world could be. The alliances he had hoped to form might very well turn into rivalries, and the enemies he hadn't yet discovered were already watching his every move. The path ahead was unclear, but one thing was certain. Ethan would have to be stronger, smarter, and more ruthless than ever before if he wanted to survive. Ethan felt the weight of the Empire's politics pressing on him as each day passed. He had always known that inheriting Corvan's legacy would not be easy, but the deeper he delved into the Empire's world, the more he realized how treacherous it was. Every decision had consequences, and every ally might hide a knife behind their back. The closer he came to understanding the Empire's intricate web of alliances, the more dangerous it seemed. Liara and Sailing continued to guide him, but Ethan was beginning to feel the strain. The constant meetings, the delicate negotiations, and the hidden dangers lurking in every corner were exhausting. He longed for simpler times when he could just be a man without the weight of the galaxy on his shoulders. But he knew that this was his path now, and there was no turning back. The Irindari faction, led by Commander Zoreth, remained a constant source of concern. Zoreth's cold eyes and his cryptic words had left an impression on Ethan, one that he couldn't shake. He had made it clear that he did not see Ethan as an ally, but as someone to challenge. The commander's ambition was obvious, and his desire for power seemed insatiable. Ethan knew that if he wasn't careful, Zoreth could become his greatest threat. But it wasn't just Zoreth that Ethan had to worry about. There were whispers of a new, mysterious faction rising in the shadows, one that operated in secret, its motives unclear. This group, known only as the Silent Hand, had no public presence, no visible leaders, and yet their influence was growing. They were rumored to be behind several high-profile incidents within the Empire: assassinations, sabotage, and the disappearance of key figures. Whoever they were, they had the ability to strike without leaving a trace. One evening, as Ethan sat in the Grand Palace, a report arrived that sent a chill down his spine. The Silent Hand had made their move once again, this time targeting a high-ranking official who had been an ally to Corvan. The official's body had been found in a remote sector of the city, with no sign of who was responsible. There were no witnesses, no clues, just an empty, blood-stained room. "This isn't just a power struggle," Liara said quietly, her face serious as she read the report. "The Silent Hand is no ordinary faction. They don't just seek power, they seek control. They want to destabilize the entire empire, sow chaos, and take it all for themselves." Ethan frowned, trying to process the information. He knew that the empire was far from stable, but the idea of a shadowy group pulling strings from behind the scenes was something he hadn't anticipated. It felt like an enemy he couldn't fight, an enemy without a face. "We need to find out more about them," Celine said, her tone resolute. "If they're targeting allies of Corvan, we're likely next. We can't just wait for them to strike." Ethan stood up, his mind racing with thoughts of how to handle this new threat. But how? "We don't even know who they are or where to start." Liara's gaze was intense. "The Silent Hand is clever. They don't leave tracks, and they don't work in ways we expect. But every organization has a weakness. Someone is always willing to talk. We just need to find the right person." It was clear that this wasn't going to be solved easily. The Silent Hand had mastered the art of secrecy, and if they were truly behind the unrest in the Empire, it meant that Ethan was up against an enemy unlike any he had ever faced. But despite the fear that gnawed at him, there was something inside him that refused to give up. He had inherited this empire, and he would fight to keep it, no matter the cost. The next few days were filled with quiet tension. Every room Ethan entered, every hallway he walked down, felt like a trap. He couldn't shake the feeling that someone was always watching him. He had always been a man of action, but in this new world, patience and strategy were more important than speed. The Silent Hand was out there, and he needed to find a way to confront them, but every move had to be calculated carefully. Late one evening, after a particularly difficult meeting with several of the Empire's high-ranking officials, Ethan found himself alone in his study. He stared out at the city below, the lights twinkling in the distance, a beautiful but dangerous world. His mind was clouded with doubt. He had inherited Corvan's fortune and legacy, but what good were wealth and power if he couldn't protect them? As if on cue, There was a soft knock at the door. Ethan turned, surprised to see Lyra standing in the doorway. She looked troubled, her expression unreadable. "There's something you need to see," she said, stepping inside and handing him a small data pad. "We've been tracking the Silent Hand's movements. This just came through." Ethan took the pad, his fingers trembling slightly as he activated it. The screen flickered to life, displaying a series of encrypted messages. The content was fragmented, but a few key words stood out: the hair, the Empire, and next target. There was no doubt now. The Silent Hand was coming for him. "They know who you are," Lyra said, her voice heavy with concern. "And they're not afraid to make their move. This is a direct threat, Ethan." Ethan's heart raced. The Silent Hand had already set their sights on him. They weren't just a shadow anymore. They were a real, tangible threat, and now he had no choice but to act. "Get ready," he said, his voice cold and determined. "We're going after them. No more waiting." Lyra nodded, her face hardening. "We'll find them. And when we do, we'll make them pay." Ethan stood up, feeling the weight of the moment. His life, his empire, and everything Corvan had built were now at risk. But he wasn't going to let this hidden enemy destroy it. He would fight back, with everything he had. Ethan had never felt more alive than in that moment. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with dangers, but the weight of his responsibility had turned into something else: resolve. The Silent Hand was no longer a mystery to him. It was a real threat. And now, with every step he took, he was drawing closer to them. The hunt had begun. Lyra, Sailing, and a select few trusted members of the Empire's forces were all prepared for what was to come. Ethan had made it clear. This was no longer just about preserving power. It was about ensuring the future of the Empire Corvan had built, and for that, he would face whatever it took. The plan was simple, though risky. They had tracked the Silent Hand's movements to an old, abandoned sector of the Empire. It was a place where many of the Empire's enemies hid, a crumbling district where even the most dangerous individuals could disappear. Ethan knew this would be the perfect place for a confrontation. No one would be able to hear their struggle or interfere. It was a place where the shadows reigned, and they had to be prepared for the worst. The night was cold, and the streets were eerily quiet as they made their way through the sector. Ethan's heart was heavy, but his mind was sharp. He had learned much from Corvan, from the way the man had handled situations with both finesse and ruthlessness. Now it was his turn to walk the same path, to face the darkness that had once threatened his friend's empire. As they moved deeper into the sector, the sense of danger grew. There were no signs of life, but Ethan could feel it in his bones. The Silent Hand was waiting, just beyond the next corner, just out of sight. They were close. "You feel that?" Sailing whispered, her eyes scanning the area around them. Ethan nodded, his grip tightening on his blaster. "They're here. Stay alert." The silence was almost deafening as they continued through the dark streets, each footstep echoing off the cracked buildings. Ethan could feel the tension rising, the calm before the storm. He wasn't sure who would strike first, but he was ready. No one would harm his empire, not while he still had breath in his body. Then suddenly, without warning, the first attack came. A blast of energy shot from the shadows, narrowly missing Ethan. The group quickly took cover behind the remains of a collapsed building, guns drawn, waiting for the next move. "Ambush," Lyra muttered, her face a mask of focus. Ethan could hear the footsteps approaching, soft but purposeful. The Silent Hand had no intention of letting them escape. This was their territory, and they would defend it at any cost. "Hold your ground," Ethan commanded. "We move on my mark." The tension in the air was thick, and for a few moments there was nothing but the sound of their own breathing and the distant hum of the city. Then, from the shadows, a figure stepped forward, slowly emerging from the darkness. It was Zorith. Ethan's blood ran cold. The commander, once an ally, was now standing before him as an enemy. His expression was cold, unfeeling, and his eyes glowed with the confidence of someone who believed they had already won. "You should have stayed out of this, Ethan," Zoreth said, his voice deep and mocking. "This empire was never meant for you. You're nothing but a puppet, just like Corvan before you." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "You're wrong. This empire is mine, and if you want it, you'll have to take it from me." Zoreth sneered, his hand twitching as though ready to strike. But before he could make a move, a new voice cut through the tension, sharp and clear. "You're too late, Zoreth," said Lyra, stepping forward. "We've known about you from the beginning." Ethan glanced at her, surprised by her confidence. She had always been the calm one, but now there was fire in her eyes. It was a fire he hadn't seen before, and it filled him with hope. "You can't stop us," Zoreth growled, his grip tightening on his weapon. "You'll see the empire burn to the ground before we let you have it." But Ethan's resolve was stronger. "If you think I'm going to let you destroy everything Corvan built, you're mistaken." Before Zoreth could react, Saline and the others sprang into action, launching their own surprise attack. The firefight was brutal and fast, as the members of the Silent Hand fought back with lethal precision. But the Empire's forces were well trained, and their resolve was just as strong. As the battle raged on, Ethan found himself face to face with Zoreth. The two men stood in the center of the chaos, the sounds of battle around them. It was just the two of them now. Nothing else mattered. "You don't belong here," Zoreth hissed, raising his weapon. "I'm not going anywhere," Ethan replied, his voice steady. In an instant, Ethan's hand moved, disarming Zoreth with a well-placed shot. The commander fell to the ground, his weapon skidding across the floor. Ethan stood over him, breathing heavily but unyielding. "This empire will never fall," Ethan said, his voice filled with determination. "And neither will I." Zoreth glared at him, but there was a hint of fear in his eyes now. He had underestimated Ethan, just as everyone else had. But now, the empire was in Ethan's hands. He had earned it through blood and sweat, and no one could take it from him. As the last of the Silent Hand fell, the battle came to an end. The sector was quiet once again, but the silence was different now. It wasn't the eerie calm of before. It was the silence of victory. Ethan stood tall, his heart filled with pride. He had fought for the Empire, and he had won. The future of the galaxy was his to shape, and nothing would stop him from building a new era of peace and strength. With Lyra and Saline by his side, Ethan knew the Empire would endure. It had been forged in the fires of conflict, and it would rise stronger than ever before. And so the legacy of Corvan lived on, not just in wealth, but in the heart of a man who would protect it with everything he had.